It's always a privilege and a joy to share in a setting like this, especially when you are with people who are committed to the Lord Jesus Christ. I want to say how much I've been blessed by the sessions that I've sat into and listened. And I was particularly impressed with the last session that we just had. And the focus was on the importance, I think, of marriage. And marriage is undoubtedly a very, very important institution. One of the reasons why we have so many challenges, I believe, in our society has certainly been because of the fact that we don't have a lot of good marriages. And so, while I reflected on that, I couldn't help but remember the fact that we are also dealing with many couples who seem to be divorcing as well. And you might have heard, I don't know if you've heard about the woman who had been married 4 times. The first person she got married to was a banker. The second person she got married to was an actor. And the third person she got married to was a pastor. And the fourth person she got married to was an undertaker. And so she was asked, how come you got married so often and in that order? And she said, 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready, and 4 to go. But you know, not only do we have people getting married and divorcing, but we also have people getting married and staying for a very long time. And you might have heard of a couple, they got married and they were married for about 60 years. And they sat on their balcony overlooking the city of Kingston and just reminiscing on the past. And so the wife said to her husband, darling, do you remember on a night like this with the moon shining and the stars out, you would have just come beside me and pinched me on my knee. And so he came beside her and pinched her on her knee. And then she says, darling, you remember on a night like this with the moon shining and the stars out, you just come beside me and give me a big hug. And he came beside her and gave her a big hug. And then she says, darling, you remember on a night like this with the moon shining, you just come beside me and give me a kiss on my cheek. And so he came and he did that. And then she says, darling, you remember on a night like this with the moon shining and the stars out, you just come beside me, hug me and bite me on my neck. And he got up and started to walk away. So she says, darling, why are you going? Have I offended you? He says, no, I'm just going to go and get my teeth. Now that I think I have you settled, we can roll. One of the challenges we face in the Caribbean is the fact that we have often defined marriages and family differently. It's always a privilege and a joy to share in a setting like this, especially when you are with people who are committed to the Lord Jesus Christ. I want to say how much I've been blessed by the sessions that I've sat into and listened. And I was particularly impressed with the last session that we just had. And the focus was on the importance, I think, of marriage. And marriage is undoubtedly a very, very important institution. One of the reasons why we have so many challenges, I believe, in our society has certainly been because of the fact that we don't have a lot of good marriages. And so, while I reflected on that, I couldn't help but remember the fact that we are also dealing with many couples who seem to be divorcing as well. And you might have heard, I don't know if you've heard about the woman who had been married 4 times. The first person she got married to was a banker. The second person she got married to was an actor. And the third person she got married to was a pastor. And the fourth person she got married to was an undertaker. And so she was asked, how come you got married so often and in that order? And she said, 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready, and 4 to go. But you know, not only do we have people getting married and divorcing, but we also have people getting married and staying for a very long time. And you might have heard of a couple, they got married, and they were married for about 60 years. And they sat on their balcony overlooking the city of Kingston and just reminiscing on the past. And so the wife said to her husband, "Darling, do you remember on a night like this with the moon shining and the stars out, you would have just come beside me and pinched me on my knee?" And so he came beside her and pinched her on her knee. And then she says, "Darling, you remember on a night like this with the moon shining and the stars out, you just come beside me and give me a big hug." And he came beside her and gave her a big hug. And then she says, "Darling, you remember on a night like this with the moon shining, you just come beside me and give me a kiss on my cheek." And so he came and he did that. And then she says, "Darling, you remember on a night like this with the moon shining and the stars out, you just come beside me, hug me and bite me on my neck." And he got up and started to walk away. So she says, "Darling, why are you going? Have I offended you?" He says, "No, I'm just going to go and get my teeth." Now that I think I have you settled, we can roll. One of the challenges we face in the Caribbean is the fact that we have often defined marriages and family members are not always present in the household, because you might have a lady, a mother who is a helper, and so she lives elsewhere because she's full-time a live-in helper, or you might have somebody who has migrated, gone to Cayman to work or somewhere to work, and so we have this kind of arrangement. What we also need to recognize is that in the Caribbean there are several family forms. We have what is called the nuclear family, and we do not define the nuclear family in the Caribbean the way North Americans define the nuclear family. North Americans define the nuclear family as husband, wife, and children, but in the Caribbean, we define the nuclear family as mother, father, and children because of the amount of common law relationships that we have. Then there is the single parent matrifocal family. It is one in which the mother is the only permanent parent figure in the family. The male is usually absent, and there are a number of variations in this matrifocal family. We have, for instance, a mother bringing up her children single-handedly. Then we might have the mother who has visiting relationships with a partner or partners, but has no permanent father figure in the household. And so there's a gentleman who comes in on a Monday night, there's one who comes in on Tuesday, there's one who comes in on Thursday, there's one who comes in on Sunday night, and that's the kind of arrangement. And he better remember which night. And so we have that in the Caribbean. Then we have also the mother who, with her children, lives in a wider descent group, usually with her mother and some female relatives. And so they all share in raising the children. Then we have what is called the extended family. And this has members of a wider descent group called the consanguine family, or those related by blood. Usually these members are together for several reasons. One, family property. Usually land is not easily divided, and so the entire family of 3 or 4 generations, they're on the property. Or you might have the entire family, they value children as a new generation to perpetuate the family name and traditions, and so they're all there raising the children together. Or sometimes they're there because of economic and domestic responsibilities for child rearing, and these are shared by a wider group. We also have in the Caribbean what we call the single parent family, the single parent patrifocal family. This is on the increase in the Caribbean. This household has no mother figure, it is usually father and children or grandfather and children. So here we have a father raising his children single-handedly without any mother. Then we have what is called the blended family. And the blended family is a nuclear family in whose home children from a previous marriage or relationship reside. And so you will find in this family, you will find a husband, wife, or mother, father with children with various names, various surnames. And so it's a blended family, because what could happen is that the mother came into the relationship with 3 children that might have 3 different surnames. The father also came into the relationship with 4 children that might have his name for sure, but they come from 3 or 4 different mothers. And so they've come together to create what we call the blended family. And the blended family sometimes happen also as a result of divorce. And so we need to understand the family form that is existing if you are going to effectively work with a family that comes to you with problems. Then we have what is also called the sibling family. And the sibling family is one in which an elder sister and or brother is bringing up their younger siblings without the help of any parent. Parents might have migrated, died, or in prison or whatever, but here is a big brother or big sister bringing up. And so one of the challenges we find in the Caribbean is that we can't just assume that we are going to use the same kind of principles that North Americans use to be effective in working with families in the Caribbean because of the kind of different forms that we are faced with. I would like to suggest to you that regardless of what is happening, we need to understand that the person who best understands family and best designed family and best can help us to know what is it that's going to make family healthy is God. And God has made it very clear to us from the scripture what family form we ought to have and what will therefore help to make families healthy. And we find that in the last verse of Genesis chapter 2, we find some guidelines, very important guidelines from Scripture. I believe the foundation for a healthy family is a healthy marriage. The last 2 verses of Genesis chapter 2 gives 4 guidelines for a healthy marriage. And I want to just reflect on them a little before we proceed to look at therapeutic approaches. It says, "For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother." This suggests to me severance, that it is important when you are establishing a family that you leave the family of origin to go to create a family of procreation. There need to be severance. You need to pull away. Why is that necessary? It is necessary because when you pull away, you are saying to your parents, as of now, my authority changed. I am no longer under your authority. We are establishing a new authority with each other. And so the scripture makes it clear, for this cause shall a man and a woman, shall a man leave his father and mother. And then it goes on to say, and shall cleave to his wife. And so we're seeing the second principle, which is permanence. Cleaving suggests permanence, it suggests oneness. I would like to suggest to you that the only relationship that ought to be permanent is the husband and wife relationship. All other relationships are temporary. The parent-child relationship is a temporary one. What we do as parents, we give our children roots and then we give them wings so that they can fly. But hopefully we give them the kind of roots that will help them to fly well. So permanence. And then it says, and they shall become one flesh, which suggests unity, oneness. And then it goes on to say, and the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed, which suggests sexual intimacy. When we fail to go in that order, we create a lot of dysfunctionality. So long before the sexual intimacy comes between man and woman, there is severance, there is permanence, there is unity, and that's God's order. In our society, we don't have this anymore. And as a result, we are faced with all kinds of dysfunctionality. And I am here to suggest that part of our real struggle and problem as a nation has been because we have decided that we are moving from God's program and God's plan to do our thing. And so now we are faced with the challenges of having done that to know and try to do some of the repairing that has to be done. Quite often you hear the term dysfunctional family, but nobody really stops to define what we mean by dysfunctional family. And I would like to share with you that there are certain symptoms or certain things that we recognize when we see these things, and we know we're dealing with a dysfunctional family. Let me haste to say that even a family that is nuclear, where the man and the woman are legally married, can also be dysfunctional. So there's no guarantee that because you have been married legally and you have done followed the steps, you have had severance, permanence, unity, and intimacy in that order, that guarantees that you're going to be healthy. There's no guarantee that because of that you're going to be healthy. So we find this functional family in all the family forms, more so in some, but in all. What are the symptoms of this dysfunctional family? One of the symptoms of a dysfunctional family is distorted communication. In families where the message that is sent is not necessarily the message that is received, is a family that is dysfunctional. Because when you have dysfunctional, distorted communication, you are likely to have all kinds of problems and challenges. You're likely to have somebody saying something and they mean one thing, but the other person hears something else and make a big issue out of it. And so you have fuss and quarrels and all kinds of difficulties develop. And sometimes communication, by the way, you're never not communicating, because even silence is communication. Silence is communication. And so communication is always taking place. And if there's silence and one interprets that silence to mean what the person doesn't mean, you can have all kinds of challenges as a result. So distorted communication is one of the symptoms of a dysfunctional family. Another symptom is breakdown of roles and rules. Breakdown of roles and rules. Every family, and every system and every organization, if it's going to function effectively, must have defined roles and must have the clear, spelled out rules. So in terms of roles, we have the roles of the mom, we have the roles of the dad, we have roles for the children. When there's a breakdown in those roles, so here are some things that daddy ought to do, here are some things that mommy ought to do, here are some things that children ought to do, and they are not doing them, you are going to have dysfunctionality. So mothers ask the children ought to be doing certain things, but they don't do it. They don't listen to mom. And so she has to do things that they should be doing. The breakdown is going to cause dysfunctionality in the family. So breakdown of roles. Breakdown of rules. The family without rules is a family that's going to be chaotic. And so you need to have clearly defined rules in a family that's understood by everybody, and therefore a commitment to follow these rules. So we have a rule, for instance, that children are not going to be watching television until homework is finished, or no television during the week. Television will be watched on a Sunday afternoon or whatever. The rules need to be communicated, understood, and followed. There might be a rule that says we are going to make sure as a family we get up at a certain time and we have devotions. Or we might have rules that says in this house, children go to bed by such and such. Whatever these rules are, they need to be something that the entire family agrees on, the entire family understands, and they have to be followed. Because once you have a breakdown, let's say you have a rule, for instance, that requires for all family members to follow. And one decided, because I am the father or I am the mom, because I'm the head of the family, I don't need to be doing. That's also a major breakdown. Because you can't be saying, do what I say, but not what I do. And so that's a major breakdown. So when you have breakdown of rules and roles, that's a sign, that's a signal that the family is dysfunctional. Another sign of dysfunctionality is stifled growth and development. Stifled growth and development. It is extremely important in families for individual members to be empowered to achieve what they would like to achieve. In some families, a mother might say, or a father might say, well, I wanted to have become a doctor, but I didn't get that opportunity, so whether you like it or not, that's what you're going to do. But that child wants to be a teacher, or that child wants to be a pastor. And they're being forced to go in a direction that they don't necessarily want to go, but that's what their parents want. That is stifled growth, stifled development. I know a young lady who's a flight attendant, but her parents wanted her to do medicine. And she did. She was bright, and she went and did the medicine. And after she had done her internship, she took her certificate to her parents, and she says, this is yours. And she went back to fly, to be a flight attendant. And that to me was a waste, because there were many others whose space she took up who wanted to do medicine. It is extremely important within the family to be able to understand that when the scripture says, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they will not depart. What it is meaning is that we must train, develop a child, help a child according to their natural bent. And so when they're old, they will not depart. So in order to help them to find out what is a child's natural bent, you need to spend the time with the children, understand their giftedness, understand their abilities, and help them along in those directions. Because the worst thing that any person can experience is to be forced to become something that they hate, they don't like. Remember some years ago, I was in court. I was caught in a custody battle, and I was giving evidence for one parent. And at the end of the case, the judge invited me into his chamber, and he says, Dr. Davidson, I noticed when you were sharing with us in court, you spoke about the various family types in Jamaica. You talked to us about the enmeshed family. You talked to us about the individualistic family. You talked to us about the traditional family, and you talked to us about the healthy family. Tell me, what type of family is my family? He says, in my family, all the children are free to do what they'd like to do, but all boys become lawyers. I said that's certainly not a healthy family. Because the boys, if they wanted to do something else, they had to do what you wanted them to do, which is to become a lawyer. That sounded more like a traditional family to me. And so, stifled growth and development. We need to make sure we are engaging in empowerment, empowering the members of our family, not controlling them. There's a big difference between controlling and empowering. Then there is another sign of dysfunctionality is win-lose decisions. When you have a family where somebody has to win an argument and somebody has to lose, that's a dysfunctional family. Because what tends to happen in these families is that you have people who might say, well, you know something, I can't out-argue you. Because, sometimes in families, women are very good. They are articulate, they are sharp, they are able to cut men with their tongue. And so the man can't outdo the woman. He can't win by arguing, so he gets physical and brutal and beat her up. And so we have these families where somebody has to win and somebody has to lose, and it becomes an abusive type of family where there's a lot of verbal and physical abuse, and that's also a major dysfunctionality. So that's a sign of a dysfunctional family. Another sign of dysfunctional families are families where you have what is called closed system. Closed system. Here's a family where nobody is able to speak. It is one of those families with a lot of silence, a lot of secrets. And so daddy is having sexual relationship with big sister. And big sister thinks that it's just herself and daddy who knows about this. That's their secret. And daddy's also having sexual relationship with middle sister. And middle sister thinks she's the only one daddy's doing this with, and that's their secret. And daddy's having sexual relationship with little sister, and little sister feels that it is their secret. And there is a cloud of secrecy and silence in that family. It's a closed system. Or mommy discovers, but mommy recognizes that if this was to be made public, then daddy might have to be taken away, and the support that they're getting financially is not going to be possible anymore. So there's a cloud of silence. And daughter comes and shares with mommy, and mommy says, "You're so wicked. What are you trying to do to problem you're trying to bring to you on your father?" And beat her down. And so she's told that, listen, you better keep your mouth shut. You better don't tell anybody. And the poor daughter can't even tell the guidance counselor or anybody, because the family is a closed system. That's a very dysfunctional family. And there are many dysfunctional families in Jamaica that are what we call closed system. Things are happening, but nobody can share, because what happens, you don't, according to them, you don't wash your dirty linen on the outside. And so you keep all that's going on within the family when it's getting worse and worse, and it is devastating human beings. That's what we have to deal with and work with in the Jamaican situation. Hence the need for family therapy. Let me just say quickly something about family therapy. Family therapists believe that the dominant forces in our lives are located externally. They're located externally in the family. Therapy based on this framework is directed at changing the organization of the family. When family organization is transformed, the lives of every family members are altered accordingly. So let's say you had a family that believe in secrecy. And you as a therapist can get into that family and break away this closed system and open the system. Then you are able to help members, to empower members of the family to share and to talk freely about what they might be experiencing. And so the code of silence that runs this family, a therapist needs to know the skills and have the ability and know what methodology to use to be able to help to bring about transformation. Because transformation is not going to occur just by working with that child who has been the victim of incest. Because you might be working with this one who you have found out about, not knowing that there are 4 more that's happening to. You are not going to really truly bring about transformation unless you're able to work with the entire family. Family therapy exerts change on the entire family. Therefore, improvement can be lasting because each family member is changed and continues to exert change on each other. Certain problems are especially suited to the family approach. Among them, problems with children, complaints about a marriage or other intimate relationships, family feuds and symptoms that develop in an individual around the time of major family transition. So sometimes, for instance, we might have a death in the family, and because that death has taken place, there's a tremendous impact on the rest of the family, and quite often you have to go and make some help. Or you might have migration, or you might have a divorce. And usually, I want you to hear me say, when a divorce takes place, the children are the ones who suffer the most. In Jamaica, you heard earlier, and I want to commend the Andersons because they had their fingers on a number of very important things. You heard earlier that Jamaica has a relatively low rate of divorce, but that in recent times the divorce has increased. One of the reasons why divorce remained low for a very long time in Jamaica was because of the fact that there were a wide different ways in which you could get divorced. And one of the major ways was to prove that the partner was having extramarital affair, and you had to really bring some good proof. And some people used to employ these private people who would come and they would give some sordid stuff, and that was very devastating for family members and all of that, because some of these things would appear in the Star, and it was awful. So some years ago, the change came about where you only have one reason for divorce now, and that is the complete breakdown of the marriage. So we have one real reason, the dissolution of the marriage. However, what has been happening over the years in Jamaica is that the divorce among Jamaicans were really taking place primarily after 25 years of marriage. Because after 25 years, by then the children are gone. You remember the Andersons pointed out the importance of couples having strong marriages if you're going to have strong families. And that's very important. Because what happened, or continues to happen in Jamaica, is that Jamaicans are what we call children-focused. They are not couples-focused. And so they stay into bad marriages because of the children. And so by the time you get to 25 years of marriage, the children are now either gone or on their way out. And so it is at that time that we notice a lot of marriages start falling apart. Because the children really was the glue that kept these people together. So we're recognizing the importance of making sure that you work with couples when you're working with families. But what is also happening is this, that when a divorce takes place, let's say the divorce takes place and the kids are quite young, the folks who suffers the most when a divorce takes place are the children. They suffer a lot. And then sometimes when these divorce takes place and then you have what we call a blended family, in the mind of that child, that are going to become blended, it is extremely important to work with the children as well as you're working with a couple. You need to get the relationship between this new person who is coming into the family, developing a relationship with the children. And so it is a very, very complex and challenging experience. So working with the old family therapists teach us that the family is more than a collection of separate individuals. It is a system, an organic whole whose parts function in a way that transcends their separate characteristics. The dynamics that's going on between people in a family is something that needs to be understood. It's not about working with one and then with... So individualistic counseling is not healthy or helpful when you're doing family counseling. Working with the whole system means not only considering all the members of the family, but also the personal dimensions of their experience. I would like to share with you some family therapeutic models. The following are some family therapeutic models which are very useful for working with families in the Caribbean. The first model is called the psychodynamic model. The therapist using the psychodynamic model approach in family therapy believes that family members are affected by each member's psychological makeup. Problems arise when there is an internalization or introjection of paternal or maternal figures. Sometimes unresolved conflicts are internalized or projected onto family members in current marital or parental relationships. Here is a family you're working with. And that husband recognized that when he was a boy, his mother used to spend a lot of time at church. And so now he's a man and he's married and his wife doesn't spend a lot of time at church. She probably just go to church on Sabbath. But he remembered how his father was always having difficulties with his mom and church. And now he is bringing that onto his wife, although that's not his reality. But he is taking something that happened in the family of origin and bringing it into the family of procreation. Or a mother, when she was a child, she discovered that her father cheated a lot. And so now that she is married, she is making the assumption that all men are cheaters. And she's assuming that her husband is cheating every time he speaks with a woman. She assumes that it's a sign that he's cheating. And she is creating a lot of conflict in the marriage, not because of anything that the man is actually doing, but because of what she is bringing back from her childhood, what she saw happening in her parents' marriage. Are you with me? And so if you try to work on that marriage without understanding the psychodynamics that's taking place, that took place previously into that child's parents' relationship, you are not going to get anywhere, because you will never understand why this person is behaving the way they do, because you are going to say to yourself, but it is stupid. Why should she do that? The man has done absolutely nothing for her to behave like that. Or why is he saying this about the lady? She only go to church on a Sabbath. Unless you understand where he is coming from or where she's coming from, and understand the baggages that he has brought into this, or the baggage that she's bringing into it, we will never be able to get anywhere. Are you with me? And so the psychodynamic model becomes extremely helpful in working with families, because it helps you to understand the introjects that they have and they have brought into a family, which has absolutely nothing to do with their reality. Then there's what we call the experiential model. The experiential family therapy encourages family therapists to be honest and direct with clients. It allows family therapists to confront family members with what they're doing and what is not working. It encourages the therapist to break through defenses and allow family members to express their feelings. This model emphasizes the recognition of emotion and teaches the skills of learning to express emotion. This is necessary for positive interaction. The principal emotion expressed openly and often inappropriately in Caribbean society has typically been anger. So here we have a person who has training in experiential family therapy, recognizing that, when the family comes into therapy, there are some members who remain quiet, who says nothing. And every time they're about to say something, one member of the family just has to look, and they just shut up. Do you know that their family is like that? One member of the family don't have to say a word, just a look. And wife, shut up. Or children, shut up, because children must be seen and not heard. And so what the experiential family therapist understands is that there are things happening in this family, and that's creating a lot of problems for this child. This child is constantly going to the doctor, complaining of various belly ache and various pain. They're having a lot of what we call psychosomatic illnesses. And so this child is constantly going to the doctor, when the truth is, it is about what is happening in the home. The child is observing that her father is beating upon her mother. The child is seeing her father do all kinds of things to her mother. And what is quite interesting is that they go to church sometimes, and the mother has the black and she's wearing dark glasses, and they want to know, what happened? Why are you wearing dark glasses? Oh, I fell and hurt my eyes. And the child knows that it's not true, that it thumped her in her eye. But the child is recognized that she can't speak. And so the experiential therapist notice and observe in therapy that the child goes something like this. When a question is asked, and you could see this child struggling, really want to say something, but daddy looked, and as daddy looks, the therapist notices the child goes up. So the therapist recognizes that this child has emotions that are being stifled. This child has emotions that are not expressed. And so the therapist finds a way to get the family to understand the importance of expressing emotions, and virtually get the family members, the powerful family member, without understanding what is going to happen, to give every family member permission to express emotions. And as we get them expressing and things are coming out, it becomes chaotic and frightening, because you never expect to hear what he's hearing. But everything is out on the table, and now that it's out, we are in a better position to work because we are getting rid of the pretense. And one of the things I want you to hear me say, one of the most difficult family to work with are religious people because they are full of pretense. You can see a husband and his wife, they're driving to church and they're quarreling like crazy. And as they come out of the car and step into church, they are so holy and righteous. You can't believe what was happening in the car. And they're going to church and they are so solid. And they leave church and they're heading back and it starts again. And guess who's observing all that's happening? The children. And the children are struggling with what they are perceiving to be hypocrisy. And they are anxious to one day grow up and get rid of all of this. And so what we do with family therapy in the experiential model is to be able to help the family to get rid of the pretense, to open up, to be frank, to be honest, to share feelings. And sometimes you have a member of the family who is very angry, but they have turned the anger in on themselves. And so you have that member being brought to you as a psychologist, as a therapist, who is always that this person is depressed. And if you make the mistake to focus, or if the person goes to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist doesn't make the distinction between exogenous depression and endogenous depression, and assume that it is endogenous and therefore begins to treat that person just with medication, without understanding that that depression is exogenous, that the depression has to do with the functional realities of the family, then what you are doing is you are medicating somebody, keeping them existing on drugs without dealing with their issue. Because when you now finally recognize that, hey, let me try and understand why this person is depressed, and you realize that the person is depressed because they're angry and they've turned the anger in on themselves, and it has become inverted anger that is leading to depression, you realize that when you help the person, you will not help that person until you help the family, because it is the family that has created the depression. And it is a code of silence in the family that makes this person unable to talk about their feelings. Are you with me? So experiential psychologists, experiential therapists who do family work, they are extremely effective in the Caribbean and extremely effective with church folks, because we church folks quite often, we keep things in. If it be possible, live peaceable with all men. And we feel that being very Christian, very religious, very good, is being able to keep the anger in. But we need to find, one of the things I say to my clients all the time, understand your feelings, but focus on behavior. We need to understand how we feel, but we must focus on expressing it in an appropriate way rather than an inappropriate way. So the experiential family therapist is able to really help us to really ventilate, to get it out, and to be able to use that information in a constructive way to get the entire family functioning differently. The Bible says that we must be angry, but sin not. The Bible also says we must speak the truth, but speak it in love. Truth-telling in love is crucial in family therapy, in couples therapy. Then there is the transgenerational model. Transgenerational model. Understanding one's own family problems and how these problems are entrenched in extended family histories are critical in this therapy. There are 8 interlocking concepts that make up this model: differentiation of self, triangles. We heard a little about triangles earlier. Differentiation of self, triangles, nuclear family emotional process, family projection process, multi-generational transition process, sibling position. In family therapy, in the transgenerational model, we recognize the importance of a person's position in the family. The first child, there's some unique stuff about the first child, unique stuff about the last child, unique stuff about the middle child, unique stuff about the child and their position. So sibling position, emotional cutoff, and societal emotional process. I would like to suggest that the transgenerational model is one of the most powerful models in the Caribbean. It is a model where we get an opportunity to look at where we're coming from, where we look at the impact of the various relationships that we have in family and also in the family of origin, and it sometimes goes back to about 3 or so generations. It gives us an opportunity to understand various concepts. For instance, it's the model that helps us to understand that there is what I call, that we have what is called solid self and pseudo-self. And I spoke earlier about the solid self, pseudo-self concept. It is my belief that too often we raise children with the development of pseudo-self and not solid self. And when we talk about people broke out, the broke out took place because there was no true development of a solid self. The faith that you have must not be parents' faith, it must be your own faith. And so this particular model helps us to help people to develop the solid self. It also talks about the importance of differentiation of self. A truly differentiated individual is an individual who has the ability to understand how they're feeling, but to focus on their behavior in an appropriate way rather than an inappropriate way. There are some people who seems to can't control feelings. And so they get upset and they just cuss and go on bad. They cannot understand that, listen, I'm angry and I'm upset, but there's a way to express myself. A differentiated person is a person who has the ability to control how they express their emotions. And so in this particular model, you are helping individuals to really be able to express anger in a very positive way. So this model is a model that helps a family who is notorious for physical violence, a family that is notorious for all kinds of abuse. It's a very healthy model to deal with abusive family. My time is going, so let me rush. Then there's what is called the structural model. The structural therapy has proved to be an effective treatment for working with extended families. It is also very effective with families from low socioeconomic background. The structural family therapist is one who recognizes that a lot of families are dysfunctional because they don't have structure. And so what the structural family therapist does is to virtually come into a family and repair it. Come into a family and says the family needs to have roles. And so you are not being, you need to be father, you need to be mother, and you must be a child. You are not a child who should be parent. And so the structural family therapist comes in and he takes charge and he rearranges things, and he reorganizes the family. He's like a bulldozer, which is so unlike what you hear therapists supposed to do. But that's what structural family therapists do. Structural family therapist says, listen, the family is so dysfunctional that they don't have a clue, so you now need to help them to have a clue. And you need to help them to recognize that they don't have rules, they don't have roles, so we need to come in and organize them. And so the structural family therapy is very effective in lower socioeconomic groups, in places where people in inner cities, structural family therapists prove to be very, very effective, because that's where it really developed. Salvador Minuchin, who developed structural family therapy, really worked in the ghettos of New York. That's where he started all his work. And so we have found it to be very effective, where we virtually actually help families to gain structure, to become more structured, and to bind to the structure, and to experience the structure, and to let the structure become theirs. So you don't teach a father to be a father. You teach a mother to be a mother. You teach a child to be a child. And you virtually help them by so doing. Then we have what is called the strategic model. The strategic therapists ensure that all family members understand their role in solving the problem for which the family sought therapy. By setting clear goals and evaluating the process, the strategic therapist ensures that tasks are achievable and are specific to the family and to the problem presented. So what the strategic therapist does is says, listen, what is it you'd like to achieve as a family? What are the goals that you want? And so the strategic family helps the family to define their goal, what they'd like to achieve. Then the strategic therapist help the family to plan a strategy to get to that goal. And the strategic therapist is going to make sure that the strategy that's being planned are realistic and not unrealistic. And so there's a lot of guidance and helping the family, the individual, to achieve their stated goal. Then we have what is called the cognitive behavioral model. The main goal of this family therapy is to either eliminate undesirable behavior or increase positive behaviors as is put forward by the family. The therapist empowers family members with the skills and knowledge to solve their own problems in the future. The techniques used fall under 4 forms of cognitive behavioral therapy, which includes behavioral parenting training, couples therapy, functional family therapy, and sex therapy. And so this cognitive behavioral model work with couples who are having problems with sex, work with couples who are having problems with in their marriages, work with the family, they're having problems with children. And so cognitive behavioral models is very, very effective, particularly in parent-child relationship. Let me now wrap up by looking at an area that is very important, and for which I think we heard a little about earlier. Premarital counseling is very important for any couple who's planning to be joined in the lifetime covenant of marriage. Ideally, preparation for marriage begins when one is a small child. If their parents enjoy a good relationship, children will learn attitudes and behaviors which enables them also to build good marriages. Regardless of what they have observed at home, however, the decision to marry is of major importance, and many couples approach their wedding day with feelings of both expectant enthusiasm and reluctant hesitation. By helping at this crucial time, you, the pastor, church leader, or counselor, will often be able to make significant contribution to the future success of these marriages. I want you to hear me say something about premarital counseling, why it is necessary. Before people get married, they wear masks. You have a female mask that is relating to a male mask. And after they get married, these masks disappear. And so the real male steps out, and the real female steps out. And the real male says, I never bargained for you, I bargained for the female mask. And the real female says, I didn't bargain for you either, I bargained for the male mask. But the truth is, these are masks. Now we have two real people who are living together. And so in premarital counseling, we need to help people to unmask each other before they get married. There are two types of counseling in Christian counseling. There's what is called prophetic counseling and priestly counseling. Priestly counseling is where you make an uncomfortable person comfortable, so the depressed person come to you must leave feeling much better than when they came. Prophetic counseling is where you make comfortable uncomfortable, and premarital is prophetic. And so you need to be engaging in an unmasking if you're going to do effective premarital work. And why this is important is because you are preparing couples to navigate through the stages of marriage. My brothers and sisters, it's important for us to know that there are stages of marriage. The first stage of marriage is the honeymoon stage. And that's what we church folks all look forward to, especially when you have been a good Christian, where you have learned to put your deposits in a deposit account, waiting for the big withdrawal on the honeymoon night. It's like the young man who knelt around the bed just after his at the beginning of honeymoon when they got into their room. He knelt down with his wife to pray before they got on the bed. And the wife giggled when she heard her new husband says, Lord, for what I'm about to enjoy, I give you thanks. So there's the honeymoon stage. But the stage that follows after the honeymoon stage is the adjustment stage. And we just heard about the kind of challenges with adjustment. And the adjustment stage can be rough. For instance, what do you do with somebody who doesn't like to bathe? What do you do with somebody who snores a lot and you are having difficulty and you don't like that? What do you do with somebody who believes that they only brush their teeth once a day? What do you do with somebody who, and they can be on and on and on. So the adjustment stage is a difficult stage, and you have to prepare people for that. Then what follows the adjustment stage is the reality stage. And the reality stage is the fact that, listen, it takes cash to care. That money, love, don't pay the utility bills. Love, don't go to the supermarket. And so the reality stage deals with that, so you have to deal with that too. And then after the reality stage comes the conflict stage. But conflict has been building from the honeymoon. And then after the conflict stage comes the stress stage, and there are two responses to stress, fight or flight. And so you have to really be working and helping people to be able to navigate through this. You know, some years ago, I have permission to share this, so I need to share it. I did premarital counseling once with a couple. And there's a question on the premarital counseling that says, how many children do you have? And the man, he was about 50 years old. Getting married to a lady was about 32. And he wrote on the premarital counseling, none. And the woman said none too. She wrote none. But I had a hard time believing that remember I said premarital is unmasking? So I was about to do some unmasking here. I had a hard time believing that a 50-year-old Jamaican man had none. So I looked at him and I said to him, I said, did you tell her about the 6 children you have? Him said, no, sir, no 6 or 5. But the man said, no. My brothers and sisters, God bless you.